Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the Writing Skill Shop workshop today. Writing Skill Shop workshop. You can help me with that, right?
Absolutely.
So today we've got Samantha Kostick, and we're very excited to have her here. Samantha's got a bachelor's in English and a master's in communication. And the goal of today is to help you all improve your writing skills that can help in your bios and your marketing and in just day-to-day life emails. So welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. My goal for today is that everybody walk out with at least one piece of writing of your own that is edited and revised in a way that you really like. So that's, so that's what my goal is. Along the way, in order to do that, we're going to go over some really common grammar monsters and also some style. So style is just, what does your writing sound like to your reader, as opposed to just, is it correct or not? Which actually I think is potentially as significant, if not more significant, in real estate, because you're doing some marketing in any piece of writing that you have. The grammar is great. It's good to let people know that you know what you're doing and you're a professional. But beyond that, you want to have some personality. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation with everybody who's online so that we're all looking at the same thing and we can see it here. Wonderful. So today's workshop is crafting your message. Use writing to reach your ideal client. And like I said, as we heard, I'm Samantha. Okay. We're going to go over a couple things today. The first one is what I call who's reading this. A lot of people approach writing from a very matter-of-fact, I'm writing it, therefore I will write down what I think it should say approach. The reality is that it doesn't really matter who's writing it. It matters who's reading it. So you could be writing it. Maybe you have somebody who writes content for you. They could be writing it. What matters is, are you reaching the readers you want to be reaching? Because not every reader is the same. So we're going to define our client. Hopefully this is something you've thought about previously. I think that's likely. So this will be more just figuring out what is the kind of elevator pitch of who my client is for my writing. Then we're going to go over grammar. It's okay, I promise. It's not going to be like that horrible time in 4th grade where they made you memorize all these rules you didn't understand, and then in high school where they made you remember rules you had only learned once in 4th grade. And we're going to apply that grammar immediately to either your writing samples. I have some spares. I really think it's much more productive to work on your own writing. It makes it feel more tangible. And then we're going to go over some style tips and tricks. These are kind of tricks of the trade. So these are things that content writers will do that take a piece, you know, maybe you send them bullet points and then they take that and it just sounds so smooth when you get it back. And so these are some of the things that do that make it sound that way. And then we'll revise. So notice that in step 2 of our day today, it says edit, and then in step 3, it says revise. The difference between editing and revising is that editing is correction. So in order for something to be an edit, it has to be incorrect to begin with, and then correct ultimately. Revision is just changes. So those are things that maybe you started out actually with a totally correct sentence. The grammar's great, your punctuation is really amazing, but it just isn't feeling interesting or it's not connecting. Those would be things that we'd want to revise. And then we'll have questions and comments. So that's a great time if I didn't cover the thing in grammar that you've just never understood, or if you find that you're having a specific issue that I didn't cover, that's a great time to bring those to me. So as we're going, go ahead and keep track if there's anything that you're like, oh man, I just wish she would have explained this. All right, so who is reading this? First of all, does everybody have a piece of writing they can work on today? That's totally fine. We're going to take like 4 or 5 minutes and I'm sure that there are people on the other side of Zoom who I didn't just call out to their face, but who don't have a piece of writing yet. We're going to take 4 or 5 minutes and let everybody grab something. If you don't have anything, I recommend your bio. copy paste a bio or a flyer or anything that you have in your email. There are, in this office, there are computers out there that we're totally free to use. Or if you want to print something, Jonathan gave us his email for this office, so you're welcome to email it to him and he'll print it out. If you don't want to work on a piece of your own writing for this office, I have a piece of paper. So that's also fine.
Can we do it digitally? Can we edit digitally?
You can totally edit digitally.
Nice.
And you're welcome to not print. You can edit on a phone or a computer or wherever you want. Thoughts and feelings? Does anybody want one of these? Yeah, go for it. No problem. These are, the reason that these are potentially good is that these are terribly written, because I've written them specifically for this workshop. And so these are much worse than any of your authentic writing will be. I've actually done this exercise in the past with just like BuzzFeed articles, because almost all of them have errors. And that's kind of fun. Okay, so before we define our own audiences, I just want to go over what people even look for in reading. So one is formality. This one, the clearest example I can give is texting. If you are texting somebody and you write in the exact same way that you would write a formal business email, that person is going to be kind of confused, potentially have some negative feelings about that text message because it seems overly formal. In the same vein, if you are writing a formal business email and you use a lot of misspelled, abbreviated words and no punctuation, somebody might look at that email and think, oh, this isn't very professional, and have a negative response to that. So people respond a lot to, is your writing the appropriate level of formality for the circumstance? That is going to relate a lot to professionalism. People think it's professional to write more formally because that's what we learn in school, is that you're going to be writing formally at work. Grammatical correctness. This one, I frequently get a little bit of pushback, and I do think grammar in the modern age of technology certainly is more flexible than it ever was with typing and print when everything was published. Because an email, in my opinion, that's just because an email or a text has no tangible weight. You don't have to get it right and then print it out and that's it. You can always kind of go back in. That said, if you have extreme grammatical incorrectness, so if you have grammar problems all over the place, your writing becomes more difficult to read. So people are not necessarily going to be looking at it and thinking, why didn't they put a period at the end of that sentence? And why didn't they? But they may be looking at it and thinking, what are they trying to say? And that's usually a response to grammar. That's usually not that your brain isn't communicating well. It's that there's something in the writing that is not coming across. And then they respond to tone. So I like to describe this one as the K phenomenon. So has anybody ever received a text message where you type something kind of elaborate, or you send somebody a long message and they just text back the letter K? Yeah. And it can feel like, right, what does that mean? Right. So that is the feeling of tone. What you're feeling there is that you don't know what the tone is. They could be sending the letter K like, okay, and be kind of angry or sarcastic, or they could be like, all right, and just sending a letter K, like very casual, and you just don't know. So that is not a feeling that you want your readers to have. You don't want them to be sitting there thinking, was she angry? What does that mean? So the tone, I think, in a lot of the writing that you are going to be doing is very important and almost always overlooked. People write for clarity, they write for correctness, and then they send it off. And potentially the person on the other side of that is looking for clarity and correctness, but mostly they want to know what you think and how you feel about them, because that's how we interact. We want to know how people feel about things. So, you know, we don't care if somebody's perfectly clear, but sounds mean. We don't, that's, the meanness becomes the priority. Okay, so when editing and revising throughout this workshop, I want you to imagine that you're, now normally I would say, let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt in life. But in writing, I want you to imagine that your audience will struggle to understand what you're saying. So maybe they're not the smartest, most acute reader, and that they will resist what you are selling. Now this one, there's actually a lot of evidence in the marketing world that when people think they are being sold something, they resist that. They don't like the feeling. And I think I've certainly felt that. I think a lot of us have felt that when a commercial comes on really strong of like, buy this thing, it makes me think, no, thank you. Even if I might like the thing. So we're gonna go with, they're kind of confused and they're really resistant. Because if we write in such a way that a confused and resistant person would still want to interact with us and would still want what we are trying to get them to do or say or think, then we certainly hit all of the people who are really fast and not resistant easily. Exercise 1. This is the first thing I want you all to do. So I want you to define your audience for the piece of writing you brought today. So an example would be, my audience is potential clients.
Just super broad.
Just super broad. Who is the group of people? So what I brought is a bio. This is likely the audience for a bio, right? Who's going to read your bio? Probably potential clients. Maybe if you brought an email that you wanted to revise, if you brought something that's more interagent, that might be my audience is colleagues. Okay, if you have finished that, you can move on to part 2 of exercise 1. Now add at least one more descriptive phrase to your first draft. Notice early on I'm talking about drafts already. Those things that we all told our high school English teachers we did, but maybe did not do. So now mine reads, my audience is potential clients looking to relocate within San Francisco. So now I've said, my audience is people who already live in San Francisco and want to go somewhere else in San Francisco. So they're relocating within this one city. Maybe I do a lot of business between San Francisco and Marin, or across the bay in some other direction. So that might come into play. Maybe I do a lot of business with people who are relocating for tech. So you're going to pick a target group that is pretty descriptive of who your audience actually is beyond just someone who might want to hire me. I have a bonus. You can add one more if you want. If you feel like, ooh, I'm really on a roll, I'm getting really specific with my audience, go ahead and add one more. If not, you're totally fine there. Does anybody in here want to share what maybe you ended up with?
I can share.
I'd love that. Thank you.
So I said, as I'm working on my bio, I said my audience is geared towards potential buyers and sellers in San Francisco and Marin County.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So notice that now you're not just writing for like this ambiguous mystery person who might work with you, right? You're writing for people who either want to do one of two things. Right. They either want to buy or sell, and they're in these specific locations that probably give you some information about them.
Totally.
Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what we're going for. We're going for enough information that we can almost kind of picture this group of people that we're going to write to. Because it is much easier to write to somebody you can imagine than to write to somebody you cannot imagine. That's a good point. And like the human being, just incomprehensible. We can't write to them. Okay, we are to the grammar portion of today. People in this room, please feel free to stop me if I go too fast or something doesn't make sense. I'm not sure people over there can stop me. If you can, feel free.
Yeah, no questions yet from the webinar room, but yeah, if you are following along and have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and I will pass them on to Samantha.
Amazing. Thank you for clarifying. So we're going to start with commas because they're the one that I frequently hear people are most freaked out about. Generally speaking, in my experience, people have a tendency toward either no commas or many, many commas. I don't know that many people who fall in the middle. Usually either there's like, these are scary, I'm not going to deal with them, done. Maybe there's one every once in a while, or they're all over the place. Like every phrase has comma. So there are, if you look in the MLA citation handbook, there are about 1,000,005 different kinds of commas, which is completely useless information to you. So I'm going to boil it down to 3 categories of what I think are the most useful types of commas and the most noticeable. So these are the ones that if you don't have them and you need them, it's confusing. The first one is lists. This is the easiest one. You all probably do this. A list is 2 or more things. So if you have 2, you can put a comma, but you don't have to. It's really when you get up to 3 that you must add commas. And a list, I mean, I like to say, if you can compare it to anything you would write down, like to go get groceries, it's a list. So orange juice, watermelon, and a banana, that's a list. Also, Noe Valley, Upper Market, and West Portal. Yeah?
You're putting a comma before and.
You're putting, and I am putting a comma before and. That's called an Oxford comma.
Yes.
It's highly debatable. Because it's actually highly debatable because there's no debate. They're both right. There's no reason to argue about it. I put a comma because there are times when you need that comma. And those times, and if this is more information than you want, feel free to forget this next part. But
I've always wanted to know.
those times when you need that comma are if I write the sentence, I'm going to get, I'm trying to think of a thing that comes in pairs. So I'm going to get new sunglasses, comma, a new color of lipstick, comma, and a right and left shoe, period. Because right and left shoe is really one item, you technically, according to grammar rules, need a comma before it to indicate that it's one item as opposed to a right shoe and a left shoe. Because if I say a right and left shoe and it's 2 items, it's not parallel structure, which we'll get to later, but I would need to say a right shoe, comma, and a left shoe. And then it would be 2 items. So sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. You can always have it. So I always put it simply out of ease of writing, because then I never have to worry, do I need it? I just put it. But there are people who it feels wrong to have the and the comma, and that's totally appropriate, and you don't have to put it. You just have to look out for when you have a pair of things that have an and in the middle at the end of your sentence, at the end of your list. Or in the middle, I suppose, but usually we put those things at the end, just logically. Okay, the next one, conjunctions. Some of you may have learned this through a song. There's a conjunction junction. What are
What's
those
your
called?
function?
Yeah, what's your function?
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock. There's a Schoolhouse Rock song, so sometimes that rings a bell for people. The way I learned it is this thing, Fanboys, which is it's an acronym for the words for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, which just spells out fanboys. Those are all of the conjunctions. So a conjunction conjoins. That's why it's called that. It puts 2 things together, and those 2 things are sentences. So if I have the sentence, I'm going to the park and the zoo, that's a list. I have the word and, but do you see how the zoo is not a sentence? It's part of a list. So that and is not a conjunction because it doesn't conjoin 2 sentences. All of these words, basically what you would look for is if I say I'm going to the park, I'm eating lunch at the zoo, and then I I can put a word in between those to make them one. I'm going to the park, but I'm eating lunch at the zoo. Or I'm going to the park and I'm eating lunch at the zoo, right? So I'm conjoining two sentences in different ways. And that's why they're called a conjunction. You always need a comma before a conjunction, 100% of the time. Okay, the last one, parenthetical expressions or direct address. Direct address is really easy. If I say, hey, Steve, let's go to the park, I'm directly addressing Steve. That's direct address. I've got to have a comma after Steve because I'm addressing him. It's the same. That's the reason you have a comma after dear when you write a letter. Dear, blah, 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 comma. Today I went to the park. That is direct address. Not that hard to remember, but pretty important. That can make a confusing sentence. If you say, hey, Steve, I'm going to the park, that one's maybe not so bad, but there are some where the Steve will just end up in the middle of a sentence. Like, what's happening? Parenthetical expressions. Do we remember what parentheses are? Probably. Parentheses go around something that is sort of related to your sentence, but maybe not 100%, so you put it in parentheses. You can actually, fun fact, you can replace parentheses that are around an incomplete sentence. So if your parentheses hold something that's not a complete sentence, you can always replace them with commas. They're interchangeable in that situation. And frequently, you have what's called parenthetical expressions. So things that are kind of, you could take them out of the sentence, you don't really need them, but they're in there anyway. You have commas around those the same way that you might have parentheses around them. So they're maybe not so separate that you want to put them in parentheses, but they're definitely different from what the rest of your sentence says. So an example of that would be, so that would be like if I said, my instructor, comma, Samantha, comma, loves commas, period, right? You don't need my name in that sentence. It could just be my instructor, Samantha, loves commas. And it would work totally fine. Or sorry, it would just be my instructor loves commas. And that would be totally fine. The Samantha is just extra information that I wanted to give you. So I can take it out, so I put commas around it. Those are basically all the kinds. I promise I'll give you time to practice them. But that's it. The only tricky one, I think, really is the parenthetical expressions. End punctuation. So we were just talking about full sentences versus incomplete sentences. A full sentence is just a noun and a verb. A noun is a person, place, or thing. A verb is an action word. So do you see how I have in parentheses, it is, at the end there? That is the shortest sentence I could think of. That's a full sentence. Because I have a noun, it, and I have a verb, is. This is important for end punctuation. At the end of a full sentence, you either put a conjunction to join it with another sentence, or you put a piece of end punctuation. So that's a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point. This is important really for run-on sentences, which are this thing where there are just like a bunch of complete sentences with no punctuation in between them, and they're very difficult to read. They're mostly tiring for your reader. Because when we read, whether we know we're doing it or not, we track the beginning of the sentence as we read. So if I'm reading this page and I read what is a full sentence, I have the word what still in my head as I get to the end, or I wouldn't be able to understand that question. So I'm still thinking, what is a full sentence? Okay, I have to remember that what is, and then the question is, which of these things is a full sentence? If that read with no punctuation, what is a full sentence, and noun and a verb it is, period, question mark, exclamation point, I just lose track of the what is. That's the main problem. I can't keep track for that long of the beginning of my sentence. Okay, semicolons. These are something that a lot of people really hate, and I don't quite understand why. They're pretty simple. They can only go at the end of a sentence, so they can only go where a period could go. If you cannot put a period, don't put a semicolon. And they join two similar ideas. So if, for example, I had the sentence, I went to the zoo, I went to the park, I could put a conjunction. I could say I went to the zoo and I went to the park. Or I could put a semicolon. I went to the zoo, semicolon, I went to the park. Because they're related. They're places I'm going, they're both outside. I like to use them when I have something that's a really long sentence. And I just know that I need to make it a shorter sentence. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll put another subject. So if I'm saying I went to the zoo I went to the zoo where the animals played freely outside in the beautiful park. That's a really long sentence. So instead I might say I went to the zoo, semicolon, the animals played freely outside in the beautiful park. Now it's much easier. It's two thoughts, but I've squished them together in a way that still grammatically makes it so we can track. Okay, parallel structure. This one looks the craziest, but is actually the most natural. Almost 100% of the time, you are going to notice that parallel structure is wrong in your head. You're going to be reading over something and think, wait a minute. The question is more about, okay, how do I correct it, right? So parallel structure is exactly what it sounds like. It's like parallel lines. Whenever there are multiples of a unit of language, they have to be the same type. So basically that means if I do something one way at the beginning of a sentence, I have to keep doing it that way. I don't get to just decide, now I'm going to do this some other way. So for example, I went running, hiking, and swimming. Here's the wrong version. I went running, hiking, and to swim. See how that's wrong? And it sounds wrong immediately. Right off the bat, you're like, no, no, no.
Right.
But the problem is when there are more complicated sentences, it can be really difficult to figure out what you're supposed to do about it. So this one, you have two INGs. So it's pretty easy to be like, okay, I'm going to put another ING, running, hiking, swimming. The next one is more like what we'd see in an actual sentence. In order to sell, we had to clean the carpets, the floors, and replace the windows. Sounds okay, but like a little funky, like maybe we could get it better. So what are the two things that are the same in this sentence? Does anybody see them? In order to sell, we had to clean the carpets, the floors, and replace the windows.
So plural.
So,
It is all plural.
so I think the first and the last comment are action verbs.
Yes.
In order to sell and replace the windows. But the floors is just independently dangling on its own.
So you're feeling the weird dangling one, which is the floors. So here we had to clean the carpets. And you see how I could also say we had to replace the windows, but I couldn't say we had to the floors?
Mhm.
So we either need to change this to be, we had to clean the carpets, the floors, and the windows. Now we're just cleaning three independent things.
I see.
Or I need to say we had to clean the carpets, repair the floors, and replace the windows.
Mhm.
And then we have three chunks that are the same. This one is always an interesting one because in my opinion, it's the easiest to spot and the trickiest to figure out how to fix.
Mhm.
You actually have to, it's not like a comma where there just should be or shouldn't be,
Right.
or a period at the end of a sentence where it's either the end of a sentence or it's not. It's something that you feel is wrong or just an odd sentence. And then have to kind of figure out, okay, what do I even switch out? The reason I put it on here, even though it's a little more confusing, is this is one that frequently when people bring me a piece of writing and say, I don't know, it sounds awkward. This is the problem with it. A lot of the time, especially in real estate, when I work on property descriptions for people, people have given this list because you want to say all the things in this beautiful kitchen. You want to talk about the marble countertops and the fancy refrigerator and the new lighting. And so people will put it all in this one sentence, which is maybe reasonable. Maybe it should be a list, but then you have to make sure that that list actually, all of the items on it are in the same structure. So this is a common one I see happen. All right. That was a lot of things. Does anyone have any questions of things I maybe didn't explain enough or explained in a way that you're like, why, how, what?
Quick question. Yeah. So like, let's take this last example.
Yeah.
Would you be able to correct it by saying, in order to sell, we had to replace the windows, clean the carpets and the floors, and put carpets and floors?
Interesting. No.
Okay.
But what you could do is, in order to sell, we had to replace the windows and we had to clean the carpets and floors.
Right.
Because then I just made it 2 separate sentences.
Got it.
So then there's parallel structure in that second half.
Right.
So you're fine.
Okay. So you're basically taking that, we had to clean the carpets and the floors and making that its own thing.
Yeah. So in order to sell, so what you're adding is we had to replace the windows.
Right.
And then I'm keeping and we had to clean the carpets and the floors.
Right.
But do you have to say you had to? Oh, go ahead.
No, you can't say we had to clean the carpets and the floors. And I mean, the replace the windows is the one that
She's moving that in her version.
I flipped it.
I
Yeah.
get
Right,
that, but
right.
I'm not sure why you can't say we had to clean the carpets and the floors. Could you say, why can't you keep it in that order?
You could say, in order to sell, we had to clean the carpets and the floors and we had to replace the windows. Yeah. So, and then you just need to start a new chunk of your sentence there, so that instead of having a list of things that are in a different structure from one another, you have one list of things and then a new thought. You could do that for sure. Yes.
Is it awkward or kludgy to say, and we had to twice in the same sentence?
Yeah, I might not do it.
Okay.
As a style thing. We're going to talk about style later. I will say I always edit first and I revise second. So the first thing I do is I go back through my writing and I just try to make everything correct, so that there's no weird dangling things that confuse everyone and lack of punctuation. And I want it to be like totally readable. And then I go back in and I'm like, is my reader going to think it's weird to have we had twice in this sentence?
Mm-hmm.
And then I might either make it into one list or make it into 2 sentences.
Or add, additionally, we replaced the windows.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, so that would be, I'd start a new sentence with additionally, comma, because additionally is extra information. So we don't 100% need it, but we want it. So we put additionally, comma, we also replaced or not we also, but additionally we replaced
And
the,
as well.
yes, any of that would work.
No, you've got semicolons, but not colons.
Yeah,
Because I have always that.
I didn't put colons, but I'm happy to talk about them.
I always never know
Colons
which is.
are very similar to, so semicolons, just, not that this is what you're asking, but just so everybody knows, they're the ones that are the dot and the comma. So they're like a period and a comma. And they're that in meaning as well. They only go where a period can go, but they act kind of like a comma, where it's 2 related thoughts. A colon is the 2 dots. Now I have a bunch of colons on this page. And in writing, so in a paragraph, so here I have colons after headers, right? Which is a different kind of colon. When you're writing a sentence, the way that a colon works is it only comes at the very end of a complete sentence. So I cannot say, I'm going to get you colon raspberries and blueberries, because that means that the sentence is, I'm going to get you, which we don't want. But I can say, I'm going to get you fruit, colon, raspberries and blueberries.
I see.
And what the colon indicates is, here's the thing I was just talking about. So I could also say he was a great hitter with a terrible end to his career, colon, that's Barry Bonds. Like, you know what I mean? Like you could, it's just, the colon just indicates, I just wrote you a sentence and here's the thing it was about. And it's either a list of stuff, like a grocery list, or a lot of the time colons come before a person. We're talking about somebody and then it'll say colon, I don't know, Charles Dickens, the writer of an age. These colons that I'm using on this page are an informal use of the colon. We see it all the time. We're used to it. It's not how they work grammatically, but it's so widely understood that it is completely reasonable to do. The thing about grammar is it's always changing. Language is always evolving. And so if you are 100% sure that people will understand your meaning, go right ahead. Like, grammar should not be here to police your communication. It should be here to help your communication. So these colons, I was 100% sure that everyone here would understand what I meant by them. So I use them, right? But I wouldn't take a whole lot of risk, because then you don't know if people will understand you. Okay, I think, was there a notification that I have?
I think you do.
I think I.
Oh yeah, that was just the chat team Upper Market confirming that some of them have some writing samples to work with, some don't. So that's good there. I just polled the room to see if they had those pieces. One question I had before we move off of grammar, Samantha, just curious to know what you think of a tool like Grammarly. It's a Chrome extension that you can use to kind of help internalize some of these rules around things like commas and punctuation.
Yeah, I think Grammarly is great. I totally, especially for something like email, where I absolutely don't expect everyone to be proofing every email religiously. Like, you have a lot of things to do, and if you can get someone else or something else to do that, I think that's great. I think Grammarly is the best one currently. So if you're going to go with one of those, that's the one that I've heard the best things about. I think everything comes with benefits and consequences, right? So the nice thing about Grammarly is that it will fix your mistakes. The issue with Grammarly is that it will not improve your writing. So on an email, for example, where you just, like, you know what you want to say, it's 3 sentences long, you just want to make sure that there are commas in the right places, Grammarly is great. On something more sensitive, where you really are trying to communicate clearly and effectively, certainly Grammarly doesn't address tone, it doesn't address formality, so it's really only addressing correctness. And because your punctuation can help guide you to better tone and better formality levels, it is a little tricky if the only way that you know grammar is Grammarly, then it's just a little limiting. But I think it's a great tool. I'm in no way saying people should not use it. In fact, I think people should use it. I just think it doesn't give you that same, okay, these sentences sound weird, what do I do? Well, what if I put them together? Or what if this sentence is too long and I took it apart? And that, I think, just a basic knowledge of grammar gives you a little more flexibility there. That would be my answer.
Great. Yeah, and we don't have any agreements with Grammarly or anything like that, but they are a pretty popular name in this space, so I thought I'd throw that out. If you do want to check that out, they're at Grammarly, that's GRAMMARLY.com, and they have a free tier that gives you your kind of basic grammar and spelling checks, and then there's a paid plan if you want some of the more advanced stuff. Not a paid sponsorship in any way, but Grammarly, if you're watching, feel free to reach out if you want to endorse us.
Yeah, I take too. I definitely think, I think Grammarly is great, and there are definitely other products that work in that same way as well. So, especially if you're not going to be doing your more sensitive writing, if you're not going to write your bio, if you're not going to write your press releases, if you're having somebody else do that, there's potentially not a high need for you to learn this information. But if you're going to do that, this is maybe useful. Okay. Exercise 2. Before we get into your writing samples, I want you to try correcting this little, what I've called a chunk of chaos, because it's not really a paragraph in its current state. located in a great neighborhood, the home has views, a beautiful dining room, and a spiral staircase. The den is a perfect spot for work, repose, or even children playing. So go ahead and take a minute or two and really try and write this out. Feel free to work with people around you. This is not like a test of your independent ability, but try and spot what's wrong and rewrite it in a way that is correct. You will have different answers. There's not one way to correct this that is the supreme way, but hopefully you can get it better than it is, because it's pretty bad right now. I'm gonna go ahead and go over it as a group. Who can, from this room, who can tell me what your thoughts are on that first piece before the exclamation point? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Anything to change?
I would actually call out the neighborhood. So I would say something to the effect of located in a great neighborhood, located in Parkside, comma, a great neighborhood.
Yeah, so located in Parkside, a great neighborhood would be a great solution here. It's giving us more details. This is very vague. I also want to point out that located in a great neighborhood is not actually a sentence.
Right.
It's not a complete sentence.
Right.
This, oh, go ahead.
This home is located in Parkside, a wonderful neighborhood.
And I think sometimes what I've noticed, this home is a great solution there. What I've noticed in real estate is that there is a push for fewer words, that it's like fewer characters, fewer words. And I get that there's a limit. I mean, when I write a property description, I have the same character limit you have. So I understand. But I also think words are opportunities. And the more of them you cut, the more information you cut. So putting a real start that conveys what it is you're marketing is not necessarily extra. It could be that we start located in a great neighborhood and we don't worry about the grammatical correctness. It could be we start maybe with something more specific, located in Parkside, a great neighborhood. It could be that we say this home. That's one of the best places for a well-placed adjective. It could say, it could be this, this home, comma, bathed in sunlight, comma, is located in a beautiful, right? Do you see how we're right up top? So it's a great opportunity to say, here's the thing I'm trying to get you to buy. And that often just evaporates into like word count. So just be careful that when you're cutting a piece of a sentence, you're cutting it with intentionality, not just because, can I get this sentence to be 3 words long? Because I guarantee there are things that are extra in all of our writing that we can cut that are not necessary, and maybe the thing we're selling is not one of them. Okay, what do we think about that exclamation point? This is super debatable.
I'm not a fan of exclamation. They're overused.
You're not a fan of exclamation points because they're overused. It's kind of like an earworm on the radio. Like when Adele's first album came out, I was like, oh my God, Adele, I'm gonna love Adele until I die. And then her second album came out and her third album came out and the radio kept playing every song. And I like don't ever listen to Adele now. And it's just like, we can get tired of things. That's one reason to be careful of exclamation points for sure.
It's also not saying a lot. I mean, it's like located in a great neighborhood. It's like, what's so great about that? What are we even talking about?
So I think what you're describing there is that it can feel disingenuous.
Right.
Exclamation points can very easily skew as fake or as selling or as over the top. Like, why are you that excited about that thing?
Right.
So, and I would say this is a moment where if somebody starts their sales pitch with an exclamation point, it makes me think this is a sales pitch as a reader. So I just, this is not to say that we couldn't use an exclamation point. Maybe if we had a better sentence, that exclamation point would feel good. Maybe if we had a sentence that said this sun-bathed corner apartment is located in the new such and such building in Soma, exclamation point.
Right.
Maybe it's really exciting news, but this sentence is not really exciting news, so it just feels over the top.
Right.
The home has views, comma, a beautiful dining room, semicolon, and a spiral staircase. First, let's talk about that semicolon. Should it be there?
No.
No. Does anyone know why it should not be there?
Because and a spiral staircase is not a sentence?
Because and a spiral staircase is not a sentence. A semicolon joins two complete sentences. That's it. That's all it does. So the home has views, a beautiful dining room. It could be semicolon, it also has a spiral staircase. I don't know stylistically if that's what we want to do, but that would solve our sentence problem.
Wouldn't you, after located in a great neighborhood, wouldn't you also want to describe what's great about that neighborhood instead of going right into the home?
Absolutely.
Because now you have, well, you're right
Yes.
into,
Right. Stylistically, there's an issue here where I've said this very vague thing. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. The word great. The word great, the word good, the word beautiful, the word excellent, the word amazing,
stunning.
the word stunning, the word spectacular.
Those words.
Those are not bad words. I'm not saying don't ever say great. I'm not saying don't ever say stunning. I frequently just text the word stunning. Like it's one of my favorite words to text. I'm all for those adjectives, but they only work if A, the thing is actually that. So don't say like, it's an amazing 1-room garage apartment with no bathroom. Like it's not amazing then. Don't say that, it's a lie. But also, not only do they only work if they're true, but they also only work if there's something else descriptive happening, right? So if great is your descriptor, you don't actually have any description, right? Like great doesn't describe anything. It's just emphasis. So if I want to say like, so a stunning spiral staircase might actually be interesting to me because a spiral staircase is a pretty descriptive noun. It's a very specific kind of staircase. But a neighborhood is not a specific, that's a place. It's almost the same as saying it's a great place for a house, right? It's nothing. It's just nothing. Okay. So that semicolon, the way it is now, I'm going to move us along a little bit. That semicolon, the way it is now, could be a comma. This home has views, a beautiful dining room, and a comma and a spiral staircase. That would solve it. That would solve it in terms of punctuation. Again, let's be careful of beautiful. This home has views of what? Or, you know, oceanfront views? Are they hills? Are they, you know, views of the trash can next door? Well, then I'm not so excited about it. Every home with windows has views. So saying that something has views doesn't actually give me any information. I would also be cautious about, this list is 3 random things.
Right.
Do you see how the beautiful views, the dining room and the spiral staircase are like not, unless the spiral staircase is in the dining room, but then are the views also in the dining room? Like what?
Right.
So ideally what we would do is move through space in a logical way. The same way that we would move through a description of ourselves in a logical way. So in a bio, we don't want to go, I was born here, also I'm part of this association, I've done a lot of business, this is where I went to college. That's because your reader is just like, great, you're a person if you do that. Everybody's done stuff and been places. You want to give a logic to your writing. So here the logic might be that I move from the views at the front of the house and I explain that. And then I say in the dining room, to get from the dining room upstairs, a beautiful spiral or a great spiral staircase leads us, right? So I'm giving some kind of logic. If you have a bio, that's gonna look more like, I was born here, I was born in San Francisco and spent my childhood running around the outer sunset. As I grew up, I realized that I wanted to be involved in real estate. So now I'm giving a story, a logic to here's why you should like me better than all those other people who are also realtors. Here's why you should like my thing better than all the other things that are comparable. Because let's be real. We're all wonderful, special people for someone. We're not all wonderful, special people for everyone.
Right.
So you're trying to reach out to that someone and be like, here are the parts of my story. Like when my fiance and I bought our house, it was really important to us to buy from a native San Franciscan, because we're both native San Franciscans. We were like, San Francisco's changing a lot. It's a dying community of native people. And that was really critical to us. Well, that really got rid of a lot of people.
Right.
That wasn't, you know, and those people were great people. We weren't like, everyone who's not a native San Franciscan is bad, right? It's just that you are not the person for every single person. However, the person who had, I'm a native San Franciscan in their bio, even though it wasn't necessarily all the clubs they're in or all the property they've sold, that's really spoke to us. So you're looking for, who do I speak to? And how do I get them to hear me? So that's gonna take us, I'm gonna go ahead and skip this. Don't worry, we'll get there. Just so we get to everything that you wanna know. That's gonna get us to tips and tricks. So these are the things that make up the difference between, oh, that person seems cool. Or, oh, that property seems nice. And, okay, this person is in my top 3. I'm gonna talk to these 3 realtors about selling my home. Or, wow, we have to go to this house first because I wanna make sure we get there before the end of the day on Sunday. Right? These are the things that actually do that. Once you have everything correct, maybe you've used Grammarly, maybe you've gone over it. Once you have everything correct, you have everything laid out in a way that's sort of makes sense. Now we're gonna go into, what do I do to stand out? What do I do to make my writing shine? The first thing seems simple, but all the time I see either I, or she, depending on whether you're writing in first or third person, or this home, this home, this home, at the beginning of every sentence. So consider swapping your clauses and adding a comma for varied sentence structure. So that's gonna look like, I am a successful agent with over 25 years of experience, would turn into, with over 25 years of experience, I am a successful agent. Now, I don't know that I love that sentence or that it's finished, but do you see the structural change that happened there? Frequently, you can take your descriptor and put it at the beginning of your sentence, and you don't have to come up, I mean, your bio is all about you. A property description is all about that property. You don't have a new subject. The subject stays the same, but you want to talk about it differently. Yeah.
Should we be concerned starting a sentence with a preposition?
No, you can totally start a sentence with a preposition. It will require a comma. So yeah, so as long as you have a comma, so with over 25 years of experience, comma, because it becomes, what happens is if you start your sentence with a preposition, it becomes extra information. So this sentence could be, I am a successful agent. Right? And so you then need a comma to ensure that it's not just ongoing extra information, that so you're using it like a parenthetical phrase. I cannot tell you why you don't need a comma the other way around, which is very frustrating for me. I would like to be able to tell you why every rule in grammar exists. All I can tell you is that that is a rule. You cannot, I mean, I can kind of give you the logic of it. Like, it makes sense that with over 25 years of experience, pause, I am a successful agent. Whereas I'm a successful agent with over 25 years of experience, there's no pause there, but I don't know why we don't pause there as humans. We just don't. In English, anyway. Strong verbs. This one is like the 0 to 60 trick. If all of your verbs are versions of to be, so this home is, I have been working in real estate for blank years, then your writing feels kind of tired. It's not wrong. It doesn't seem bad, but it just is kind of drab. The fastest way to spice everything up is verbs. I got home versus I rushed home. I told you versus I informed you. You're giving a nuanced meaning that's exciting to readers. So if I, instead of saying, this home is, or this home has, I say, this home
Invites.
guests onto the back porch for dinner and drinks. That's so much more exciting than people can go outside and enjoy, right? Like we want to avoid to be, to have, to be able, those verbs that we use. The verbs that you learned first in a language class are the verbs that you want to use as little as possible in your writing. Because we use them all the time. That's why you learned them first in your Spanish class in high school or whatever. Okay. This one is my personal demon. Take out the fluff. I love a good long sentence and a lot of descriptive language, and I like for everything to be really beautiful. But the reality is that what feels beautiful to me maybe is extra to my reader, or is confusing, or, you know, it just makes it long. People don't want to read long things now. So you want to keep your sentences especially, but also your paragraphs short and sweet. What do you need to communicate? Readers appreciate clarity and brevity. They appreciate you being to the point. I think a lot of the time, if you can put a numbered list or bullet points in an email, great. People love that. They love, like, I'm going to need these 3 things, 1, 2, 3. Here are my 2 questions about this project, 1, 2. There's something very satisfying about, I can totally keep track of those. You know, like, I'm not going to lose this information. I don't have to hunt through this paragraph to find it.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't recommend that in a bio, having a bulleted list, unless you volunteer at 800 organizations, in which case, amazing. I'm so happy that you're doing that and it's benefiting the world, but potentially don't write a paragraph of organizations, maybe make a list. So that's one that will help. And then specific original adjectives. Notice that I did not just write adjectives. This goes back to that great, beautiful, here I even have here, when in doubt, be more specific. Was it beautiful? Or was it stately, Victorian, delicate, handsome? This one is directly related to your audience. If your audience, everyone's looking for a beautiful home. That doesn't get you anyone and it doesn't lose you anyone. Everyone is looking for a big pool if they want a pool. Nobody's like, you know what I want? A tiny pool. Just one foot goes in. So what you're trying to do is figure out, okay, if everybody's going to say, this house has a big pool. If every realtor is going to say, I have lightning fast response speed, I'm going to get back to you immediately. Everybody's going to say that. Because if you are a good independent contractor of almost any kind, you have to have good response time. What is the thing that I say about my response time that other people are not saying that speaks to my audience? What's the thing I say about this pool that is not true about every pool, that speaks to my audience? So if your audience is people in San Francisco and Marin, for example, you might think, okay, well, people in San Francisco and Marin, but, you know, especially like, let's say we're in Marin, there tend to be a lot of families in certain areas of Marin, right, who might be really interested in the school districts. Mm-hmm. Well, instead of saying, this is a great school district, which everybody says about a ton of school districts. Well, some of them are great and some of them are decent, and that doesn't communicate anything. Your reader's not like, well, this person says it's a great school district, right? Maybe we say something actually specific. Maybe we use an adjective like highly rated with this organization, or maybe we use an adjective like a very community-driven school district. Those adjectives are actually going to drive business. Saying that a realtor is efficient is probably not going to get people to click on their bio and be like, this is my person. But saying that a realtor is like works quickly and carefully, right? Combining adjectives maybe is how you do it. Or saying that a realtor works with the busy schedule of their clients in mind, right? So now you've said busy people. That's who I'm looking for. And so if you're a really busy person, yeah, you're looking for high response time, but you also maybe are more drawn to somebody who says, I work with busy people all the time, than somebody who just says, I'm fast. You know?
Mhm.
So that's a big one. I would say that between strong verbs and original adjectives, you could completely transform a piece of writing, even without necessarily looking at sentence structure or cutting it down. You could have a piece of writing that's too long and repetitive, but has incredibly original adjectives and really specific verbs, and it would still read well. It would sound good. It would be interesting. People might stop before the end if it's too long, but that's not the end of the world. Or they might think, okay, well, this person is not the most interesting writer in the world if the sentence structures aren't varied, but they still might be drawn in just by the verbs and adjectives matching up with them. Okay, now we're going to try it on our own writing sample. I have the style things here. I'd also like people to look at the grammar, because we didn't get a chance to do that. I wanted to make sure that if people needed to leave, because it's 2:09 now, so we're running a little over. So I wanted to make sure if people wanted to leave that they could. This is the last part of the workshop. So if you're like, I have to run, you can. I would recommend, while this is fresh in your brain, if you have 10 or 15 minutes, or even 5 minutes, take some time, look at a couple sentences of your writing, and implement some of these things, and really take a look for what are your pitfalls. Like, I know that I write sentences that are too long. So when I look at my own writing, I look at it with an eye to shorten it, to shorten my sentences, to make my paragraphs shorter and denser. When you look at your writing, are you seeing a bunch of really boring adjectives? Are you like, oh my gosh, my bio is 900 words long. Okay, well, that might be something to think about. And then I'm just going to hang out and be available for any questions anybody has.
What are your preferences or suggestions around the bio? Are you talking always in the third person, or what do you think is most effective?
So again, I would go back to your audience. So for example, if your audience is business professionals, like let's say you want to deal with developers and potentially investors, people who are maybe not going to live in the home, that person probably wants a high level of formality, right? They probably want it to sound much more like professional deal making. That's probably third person. That's probably not a like, hey, I feel this way about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you are finding that, let's say that you've got this huge referral business coming in from like a school or a school district, and it's a lot of parents, young parents who are buying homes. They maybe want first person. They want to feel safe. They don't know what they're doing. They're a little freaked out, right? So first person is a much warmer, more open way to write, which scared clients tend to like. People tend to respond to somebody writing in first person if they're nervous. The same way that we respond well to some, if I'm scared and Samantha tries to comfort me by saying like, well, people are sometimes scared.
Right.
Not comforting. Whereas if she says like, I'm sometimes scared too, right? Like, that's comforting because it's warm to hear somebody's first person experience.
Yeah.
However, because it's warm, because it's personal, it decreases the level of formality. It's not as formal.
Right.
Third person is more formal. So saying like, Samantha has been teaching workshops, we're both Samanthas. Samantha has been teaching workshops for 190 years and has a high level of expertise. She, that's going to sound much more official because it sounds like I didn't write it, even though I did.
Right.
Right? It sounds like somebody else wrote it, which is going to sound, that separation actually is going to sound more official and professional to some people. So it's really about deciding who, and it might be about deciding who is the bio for. Like if you have a huge referral business with all of these young parents, your bio might not actually need to reach out to them because they're getting a referral. Maybe your bio needs to reach out. Maybe you're like, wow, I'm getting a lot of these referrals for these young parents, but I can't seem to, maybe they don't have as much money saved, and I really am looking to attract some clients who are more professional and have been in their career longer. And so then your bio might be third person to draw that in. It's all about audience though.
And when you're new, you're not totally clear who your audience is because you're just taking business however it comes.
So then I would think about your ideal audience. Doesn't necessarily have to be who you're already attracting. Like, who do you think you want to work with? Like, I wrote a bio for somebody who felt really strongly about working with people who are struggling to move to San Francisco, which is a hard group to decide to draw because they're discouraged and they're struggling, and they maybe financially don't feel like it's not the same as like trying to draw people who are already here and have a bunch of money. And so that was going to be a really interesting bio, right? That was going to be a bio that was first person and was more of a story about that agent's relationship to San Francisco, right? As opposed to a list of accomplishments, because the person who's struggling, they're not worried about how many accomplishments you have. They're worried about whether they will even be able to do this. So it's a different pitch. So just consider like, yeah, that would be a consideration of who do I want to work with? And then what do they need to hear to decide I'm the one? Elderly clients tend to need to hear a lot about the stuff other than real estate. So they need to hear about preparing the house for sale. They need to hear about, the taxes and fees associated with selling their home because they're on fixed income. They need to hear about stuff other than just, I will get a buyer for your house. Because like, sure, you'll get a buyer, but I'm not in a rush. I'm just scared about what comes next and how this is going to go. And maybe my kids are going to be involved in a lot of it. So it's just getting yourself in that headspace of like, who's this person? What do they need to hear to feel better about me than they feel about anyone else? And it does, I think the thing that's really hard is it means sacrificing some people, because your reader can't be everyone at once or it'll just be really dry.
Right.
So if I'm pitching to young parents who are struggling to buy a home, that pitch is going to be different than the pitch to a developer. I can't have, now I can have information that would be useful to a developer so that if I send my bio, they're not like, what is this, right? But I'm not going to write it the same way start to finish. So I think that's really difficult too. I think there are a lot of people who really want their bio especially to read for everyone. And I think you can write that bio. That bio certainly exists, but it's just a page on a website. I think it's a much less effective tool. And like a lot of that is just from my personal experience reading people's bios, trying to buy things from people. The thing in the bio that makes me want to work with somebody is usually not the thing that's in everyone's bio. It's usually the thing that's only in their bio, which is a personal thing. That's tricky though. That's something that I also think, I know that Zephyr has marketing services available to all of the agents. And I think that a marketing team would be an excellent place to go to look for, if you're really struggling to define who is my audience, like, oh man, that thing I wrote at the beginning, feels so big, and I kind of know who I want to work with, but, or like, you know, maybe you're feeling like I know that when I have started new projects, there's sometimes that comes from a place of fear where I'm like, well, I don't want to work with mean people. Well, that's not an audience, right? Like that's just a fear. So if you're really having trouble, I think that is what marketing people do, is they decide who is our target and how do we reach them. And so they're gonna be an excellent source for that information. Because usually as a content writer, that's something I'll ask the agent. I'm not defining that for them so much as I'm like, who do you work with? Who do you want to work with? And then I'll use that information. But marketing people will actually help to kind of shape it.
Would you maybe want to end on just a quick recap of like maybe the main takeaways from each exercise, and then we can wrap up the webinar? And sounds like you're going to stick around for a little bit, at least in the room, to answer.
Yeah, I'll be around if people have questions, or I'm actually, I don't know how many people are even here, but depending on how many people are here, I'm happy to, like, if people have a specific, like, I don't know what to do about this sentence. We don't have time to go over everybody's whole writing piece, but if you have a specific question, I'm very happy to do that. So just in summary, figure out who your audience is. That's the first thing we always want to do. And then we're going to write something. We're going to get it as correct as possible using commas. I'm not going to get these in the order they are on the slide. Commas, semicolons, parallel structure, and what else did I go over? Should I check? Something else.
Oh, sure. We can go back.
I'm going to go back so I can see it. Commas. Oh, and punctuation. Great. And then we're going to read over for style. And this is where the magic happens of convincing somebody that your writing is for them, and that the thing that you are trying to get them to do, think, or buy is for them. And that's going to be, I'll just go to this so I don't. Varied sentence structure, strong verbs, taking out all of the extra stuff, all the fluff, and specific original adjectives. So those are all of the little tips and tricks that I have for you today. But again, happy to answer any questions or things I didn't cover. Writing is a big topic. Lots of stuff in it. So if there are things I didn't get to. Yeah.
Samantha, thank you again for being here, and for the valuable information on improving your writing. I think there's a lot of great takeaways here, and we will have this up on YouTube in a couple days here, so you can review the slides or some of the advice that Samantha dropped on us in a couple days.
All right. See ya.